California says you can legally carry a gun, just don't expect them to ever give you the permit. A federal judge just exposed the entire system as a paper-thin illusion, and if this case keeps going the way it's headed, the state might be forced to hand those permits over for the first time in history. What's up, everyone? This is your boy Ted from Line 45, and today, I'm breaking down the court hearing that could blow a hole in California's carry permit game and change the rules for millions of gun owners across the state. Before I start, I would really appreciate it if you would push those buttons below. The subscribe button, the notification bell, all of them. This is not necessary, but those little clicks help a brother out. Now, buckle up, and let's get back to the video. If you've ever carried in a state that respects your rights, California feels like a different universe. Their open carry permit law technically exists, buried in Penal Code sections 26-150 and 26-155, but it's functionally a locked door. You can only apply in counties with fewer than 200,000 people. That knocks out 95% of the population right off the bat, including every major metro where carry rights matter most for daily self-defense. I've trained with guys who moved from states like Arizona or Texas to California and tried to play by the rules. They found out quickly, even if you're in one of those rural counties, sheriffs just deny every application. Not a single open carry permit has been issued statewide. Zero. And if you somehow got one, you still couldn't legally cross into the next county with it. It's like getting a fishing license that only works in a puddle. The state argues the law is facially valid, but that doesn't mean it's constitutional in practice. That's exactly what the current Ninth Circuit case is hammering. It's about how a law that claims to recognize open carry rights is written and enforced in a way that guarantees no one actually exercises them. This isn't hypothetical. If you're a gun owner living in Los Angeles, San Diego, or San Francisco, you're legally boxed out. You have no path. Which is why this case matters, not just for open carry, but for the idea that a constitutional right should be usable, not just theoretical. Now, let's go straight into that courtroom moment where the judges started calling this bluff out loud. Courtroom hearings don't usually make you raise your eyebrows, but this one did. When the Ninth Circuit sat down to hear arguments on California's open carry law, it didn't take long before the state's entire system started falling apart under scrutiny. Judge Lawrence Van Dyke, no stranger to constitutional issues, pushed hard from the bench. At one point, he flat out asked whether getting a carry permit in San Francisco was like asking the DMV for a license to shoot spacecraft. That's not just rhetorical heat. It's a direct hit on the absurdity of a right that exists only in theory. The state's attorney, who was trying to justify the zero-permit reality, stumbled through her explanation. She couldn't point to a single issued permit, and not one, across all 58 counties. That's 40 million residents and no functioning path to exercise the right to carry. The judges weren't buying it. They pressed her on why the law even exists if nobody's allowed to use it. That courtroom moment wasn't just about one case. It was about exposing a framework that gives the illusion of access while denying it in every way that counts. For anyone who's ever filed a permit application and been ghosted or stonewalled, this was vindication in real time. So no, this wasn't just a bench full of judges nodding politely through a state defense. This was a judicial beatdown of a system built to look legal but operate like a wall. And that takes us right into what may be the most brutal assessment yet. Have you ever read a law, followed every rule, filled out every form, and still ended up with nothing? That's the kind of trap California's open carry law sets. And during that Ninth Circuit hearing, the judges finally called it what it is. One of them described the system as entrapment disguised as policy. Now, coming from the bench, that's not casual language. That's an accusation that the state built a legal process designed to fail. Here's what makes it worse. Even if you lived in a county small enough to qualify for a permit, and even if you got your hands on one, which no one ever has, you'd still be confined to your home county. Step over the line into the next jurisdiction, and now you're a criminal. That's not security. That's a ticking legal time bomb. I've seen bureaucracies stall people out, but this is something else entirely. When a permit system is set up to produce zero permits over decades, it stops being a regulation. It becomes denial by design. The state argues the framework is lawful, but the lived reality for gun owners says otherwise. If you can't access a process, that process is meaningless. This wasn't just about red tape or backlogs. This was about the intentional obstruction of a constitutional right, dressed up in procedural clothes. And once the state leaned on their fallback argument, that carry might be allowed only in extreme, emergency-level scenarios, the whole thing took an even more surreal turn. You know it's bad when the government's defense sounds like a joke, but no one's laughing. During the Ninth Circuit hearing, the state's attorney tried to justify the complete lack of open carry permits by saying they might be granted in extreme emergencies. Then she gave an example that caught even the courtroom off guard. A foreign army invading California. That's where we are now. An entire carry system defended by hypotheticals that sound like bad movie plots. Now I've carried in real life, not theory. In real life, threats don't wait for foreign armies. They show up in parking lots, gas stations, your front porch. The idea that a constitutional right only kicks in when missiles are falling and troops are storming the coastline? That's not regulation. That's a make-believe policy used to justify absolute control. What made it worse was that the state didn't offer any serious path to access. Just a vague, unreachable threshold. The judges caught it immediately. One of them asked, point blank, whether the right to carry for self-defense applies before an invasion or only once the state is already under siege. That moment didn't just undermine the state's credibility. It exposed their entire system for what it is. A legal dead end wrapped in paper-thin justification. It also forced a broader question into the spotlight. Because if California can pull this off, what's stopping other states from doing the same thing under a different name? So what does this mean for the rest of the country? You don't need to be from California to feel the ripple effects of this case. States like New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, they've all got their own versions of this permit maze. Fancy language, lots of paperwork, and practically zero approvals. It's a coordinated playbook, and until recently, it worked. But this case in the Ninth Circuit is lighting a fuse that could run all the way to the Supreme Court. Since the Bruin decision in 2022, the game has changed. SCOTUS made it clear. States can't treat the Second Amendment like a government favor. If you're going to regulate carry rights, those regulations better line up with the nation's historical tradition of gun laws, and these modern permit traps don't come close. What makes this California case so dangerous, for the states that built their laws on bureaucratic denial, is that the court isn't just asking whether the law exists, it's asking whether it actually functions, and California can't hide the numbers. Not one open carry permit, 40 million residents, system-wide denial. That's a statistic that every judge in that courtroom saw with their own eyes. This isn't just about fixing a broken policy, it's about calling out a pattern that's been quietly spreading across the country. If the Ninth Circuit finds that California's system violates Bruin, you can expect a legal chain reaction in every state that's been playing the same game. And that brings the fight right back home, to the people who've been boxed out by design. If you've ever lived in California and tried to carry legally, you already know. It's not about following the rules, it's about running into a wall. I've talked to folks up and down the state who've spent years navigating concealed carry permits, let alone open carry. Some sheriffs outright refuse to process applications. Others bury you in paperwork with no intent of approval. What this case could do is finally crack that wall open. If the Ninth Circuit rules against the state, it won't instantly legalize open carry across California. What it would do is force the state to either start issuing permits under a system that actually works, or scrap the law and come up with something new. Either way, they lose the ability to hide behind a permit process that produces nothing. And this isn't just about rural counties or edge cases. If the ruling recognizes that an open carry law can't exist in name only, it forces a rethink of how California handles every part of firearm permitting. That could lead to more accountability on concealed carry approvals, too, especially in counties that still act like May issue is alive and well post-Bruin. We're talking about real-world change here. Fewer dead-end applications. Fewer sheriffs are acting as personal gatekeepers. More legal clarity for people who are just trying to stay within the law. Now that we've seen what's at stake, we're left with the final question. Will the court actually follow through and call California's bluff once and for all? This whole case boils down to one question. Can a state write a law that pretends to recognize a constitutional right while making it impossible to exercise? California's been doing that for years with its open carry permit structure, and now they're backed into a corner. What the judges saw during oral arguments wasn't just a broken policy, It was a legal setup built to fail by design. And no matter how smooth the state tried to sound, the facts didn't lie. Not a single permit. Not one. From where I sit, as someone who's carried under real permitting systems in multiple states, this isn't a policy debate anymore. It's a question of honesty. You can't call it right if your system makes it unreachable. The Ninth Circuit knows that, and based on the tone in that courtroom, they're not buying the state's emergency-only defense. If they rule against California, it could force a full reset not just in this state, but in every state that's pulled the same bureaucratic trick. This isn't a guaranteed victory. The court could still kick the can down the road or narrow the ruling. But the momentum's different now. The courtroom heard what gun owners have been saying for years, and this time it's on record. Whether the change comes next month or in front of the Supreme Court, one thing's clear. This case may finally force California to do something it's spent decades avoiding, and that is to treat carry rights like they actually mean something. And that's a fight worth watching.